Hello and welcome to Simple Time Studios. Continuing the series we started with The First Run, Ark survives his ordeal and tries to get his life back together after losing seemingly everything. But every setback is an opportunity and a new one has just presented itself. Enjoy this story that has been cleaned up for clarity, consistency, and YouTube. Hope you enjoy. Night Shift. 3 months after the events of First Run, after Ark and Ariana escaped a remote deep space colony inhabited by transhumanist cultists that lured spacers to a violent death with the promise of rich salvage, the two of them returned home to the thriftic binary to figure out exactly how they were going to explain what happened to the authorities. Which went better than Ark expected, at least. The binary police did not believe them. The report was filed and politely dismissed, and Touchdown Salvage decided it was more economical to just fire the two of them than conduct their own investigation, which, Ark realized, was still a lot better than things could have gone. They weren't thrown in prison, they were still alive, and they weren't in any new debt. That alone was a lot right there. Ariana was obviously heartbroken about this turn of events. Ark couldn't blame her, even though he knew this was probably how things were going to end. Jim and Smith were still dead, and the cult was still out there tricking spacers like the crew of the Rambling Gent. The cult was also aware that the two of them had escaped, something Ark was sure would come back to haunt them later. So it was perhaps for the best that the two of them went their separate ways after returning to the binary. Ariana and her drone Jeeves went back to Fazura, and Ark returned to Jylor. He didn't know Jim or Captain Smith personally, but someone had to tell their families that they won't be coming home. Jobless and depressed, Ark went back to working odd jobs in the frozen tundra of northern Jylor, scraping money together. Eventually, an opportunity to leave the planet emerged. One that was dangerous, but he realized he would be crazy if he didn't take it. Which led to where he was now, in the endless maw of Diff, trying to get hired as a maintenance worker. To take full advantage of this opportunity, he needed to get through this interview. Well, Mr. Gnosh, your resume certainly is what we're looking for. What made you decide on applying at Sammy Screen's Pizzeria? Zora, the restaurant's owner, asked as they sat in her office. Ark smiled slightly and nodded as he considered the best way to answer her question as he looked back at Zora. Like Ariana, Zora was a green-skinned Fazorian, yet the two could not have been more different. Where the red-haired Ariana was overweight from years of sitting behind a workbench and having mechanical familiars spoil her with recipes drawn from a galaxy-wide culinary database, the platinum blonde Zora reminded Ark of old fairy tales of living skeletons. Thin with a noticeable lack of seemingly any muscle mass or adipose tissue, Ark was certain his prospective employer was borderline anorexic, something that made her business of choice all the more ironic. But then there were her eyes. Whereas Ariana's brown eyes shone with a childlike optimism until the reality of the gliding rim hit her like a truck, Zora's pale blue eyes seemed to regard him with a certain coldness he never expected to see in a Fazorian. Sure, the robotics wizards were all full of themselves, but this was something different. Something about this one was sending a slight chill down his spine. He kept these observations to himself, answering her question instead. Well, Sammy Scurry is clearly a popular place. I've seen ads for it from here all the way down to that big indoor ocean. Figured any place that's slathered half of the endless mall in advertisements is a good one to get a job at. And with all this machinery, you definitely need someone who can fix it. He replied with equal parts truth and brown-nosing, recalling what he had learned about the pizza parlor before filling out his application. Sammy Scree's Pizzeria was a pizza parlor and entertainment complex in a recent mid-level expansion of the Endless Mall. Arcade with hollow-tag arena, cavernous party room, concert hall with an animatronic band of droid musicians capable of housing 200, and a small movie theater that seated 50 people in addition to the pizza parlor that seated 400. All of them built around the anthropomorphic Sammy Scree and her heavy metal band. Ark did not remember the names of Sammy's bandmates, only that they all looked like an absolute nightmare to fix when they invariably broke. "Oh, so you saw our latest ad campaign. Do you like our mascot? I made her myself," Zora asked with a smug glee, bringing him back to the present. "I'm surprised you haven't tried to make toys out of that little devil yet," he replied with a smile he hoped wasn't too forced. Mentally he was thinking, "What in the gyre is wrong with you? What parent would give a plushie of that thing to their kid? That toothy smile is going to take ages to forget." Zora nodded approvingly. Ark had said all the things he needed to say to seal the deal. "Welcome to the team. How soon can you start, Jacob?" she asked, reaching forward to shake his hand. The lanky, weathered mechanic, dressed in business casual, rose to his feet and shook the offered hand. "When do you want me to start?" "You can start tomorrow night at 6 p.m. regional time," the pizza owner smiled. Ark returned her smile and made a mental note of the time before politely seeing himself out. On the way out of Sammy Scree's pizzeria, he continued to make mental notes of the building as he threaded his way through the crowd of kids and parents coming and going. The floor plan, the position of each area relative to each other, the locations of all the stairwells and emergency exits, making sure to keep his observations as discreet as possible. The interior of the pizzeria was typical Fazorian construction. Sleek corridors decorated with bright whites and soft colors that Fazora favored. Bright advertisements for shows and meal specials lined the walls. Robotic servers zipped past him, the aroma of hot pizzas hanged in the air a second behind them, and the walls echoed with the squeals of children and the sighs of long-suffering parents. Outside the pizzeria and on his way back to the monorail that would take him home, Ark walked through a broad indoor thoroughfare. Shops for everything from designer bodysuits tailored for the average gym-body Fazorian to all manner of consumer electronics and other gadgets. Portable game consoles, robotic plushies and action figures, robotic kitchen appliances that do everything for you except buy the ingredients. The sheer variety of products left the Gylor mechanic slightly disgusted as he made his way onto the monorail. So much for the Fazorians admiring Gylor's frugality. Once safely on the monorail that connected this sector with the larger moon-wide mall, Ark took out his personal communicator and dialed the number he was told to call. "Hi, it's Ark. I just finished the interview. I start work tomorrow night at 6. "Good. We'll make sure everything else is ready. Also, there's been an update. I'm sending you the relevant file now," the modulated voice on the other end replied. Ark accepted the file his contact sent him, his eyes going wide as he quickly skimmed the contents. "Okay, I'll keep an eye out. Just remember to keep to your part of the plan, and I'll keep to mine." "No need to worry about that, Ark. You just focus on your part. Shield out," his contact answered, then ended the call. Ark stared at his communicator before shaking his head and putting the device back into his pocket. Guess there was nothing left to do except get ready for tomorrow night and hope that this wasn't a mistake. The next evening, Ark arrived at work dressed in his coveralls with his toolkit in hand. No one was there to greet him as he walked in through the employee entrance. The place was empty. The guests were gone and the automation appeared to have been shut down for the night. Already that was a bad sign. Zora or someone else should have been here to greet him and show him around. For that matter, was there anyone actually working here other than Zora and himself? Everything he saw when he was here during the previous day was vending machines, robots, and self-service terminals. Damn Fazora automation. He had half a mind to turn around and give up on this farce. Pulling out his personal communicator again, he dialed the pizzeria, and after a second of navigating an automated directory, he was transferred over to what he assumed was Zora's communicator. "Hello, Zora. It's Jacob Gnosh. You hired me yesterday. I'm here on time and ready to get started." For a second there was silence, then he heard a burst of static that echoed over an intercom somewhere over his head. "Oh, hello, Jacob." The familiar voice of Zora appeared over the intercom. Ark's sense of foreboding was increasing. "Please head to the employee lounge and wait for me there. It's over by my office," she asked. Sounded like she was distracted by something. "Sure," he replied, much less trusting than he was the day before, and took 3 steps into the pizzeria before the automatic doors slammed shut behind him and audibly locked themselves. "What was that?" Ark asked, still having his new boss on his communicator. "Just a security feature. The doors lock automatically a few minutes after the night shift begins, to make sure no one gets in or out. Are you making your way to the employee lounge?" Zora replied, sounding audibly agitated. "Great. Yeah, I'm heading to the lounge. I'll see you there," he replied before closing the channel. Cutting through the massive automated kitchen full of robotic arms and computer-controlled ovens, he found the employee lounge and quickly looked around after stepping inside. Lounge was standard enough. A sofa and some chairs next to a small dining table. In front of him, a kitchenette with a robotic coffee pot and a combination mini-fridge microwave appliance cube to his left. In addition to the door leading back out to the kitchen behind him, it also had 2 transparent aluminum doors that connected to the manager's office and a maintenance office. All in all, not the worst amenities he ever had to put up with. Seeing that there was no one else in the room with him, Ark reached into his toolkit and activated the wireless universal remote. With a click of a button, the 3 doors all closed shut and locked themselves. And a good thing, too. No sooner had he locked the room than S.H.I.E.L.D. was calling his communicator. "I was just about to call you. I think we have a problem," Ark began, pulling out the large caliber magnetic handgun he had hidden in his coveralls. The Exorcist pattern hand cannon was a comforting weight in his hand as he checked the 8-round magazine, made sure it was loaded, and slid it back into place. "Ark, there's been a leak. We don't know what happened, but you need to get out of there. Your cover is blown," S.H.I.E.L.D. replied, frantically. Hands holding his weapons so tightly his knuckles went white, Ark looked up and towards the transparent aluminum door leading into the manager's office. Standing behind the locked door, staring right back at him, was a woman dressed in a Sammy Scurry costume. From foot to neck, the female stranger was covered in a velvety black fox fur, their face covered in a white mask that was fixed in a broad grin. Unblinking eyes followed him as he walked from one side of the room to the other. In the stranger's right hand was a long blade that looked more suitable for cutting through dense jungle foliage than it was for cutting pizza toppings. Coating the blade was something that Ark could only hope was pizza sauce. Nestling his communicator between his cheek and his shoulder, he raised his weapon and pointed it at the door. "Sorry, Lieutenant Detective S.H.I.E.L.D. I'm afraid it's a little too late. I'm locked in here until morning unless Intercrux knows how to breach a half-ton fire door." Sammy audibly slammed her fist against the transparent aluminum door in frustration as she began to realize just how badly she had been played. "She's in the room with you?" S.H.I.E.L.D. asked. "Next room over. My gun's drawn and we currently have a locked transparent aluminum door between the two of us. How long before the tactical unit arrives? Because right now I'm very glad I took advantage of that equipment expense account," Ark replied as he gripped the Exorcist in both hands again and raised it towards the blade-wielding assailant. S.H.I.E.L.D. was silent for a moment. "All right, Zora, I know you're listening on this line and my man tells me he has you in his sights. Throw down whatever little death toy you have and surrender." Zora, proprietor of Sammy Scurry's Pizzeria and the prime suspect in an unsolved kidnapping spree, finally spoke. "You're already too late. The time is almost at hand," the masked woman laughed. "All I need to do is—" she began before something seemed to cut her off mid-sentence, unblinking eyes suddenly glowing with a cold blue energy. Without another word, Zora took off. Ark merely stood there, listened, and silently counted the seconds before exhaling. "She's gone. What in the gyre was that all about?" "She's gone?" S.H.I.E.L.D. asked, then spoke to someone else on his end. "Ark, I'm spliced into the building's internal sensors. We're picking up 7 life signs. You, her, and 5 others that were in a room that isn't on the original floor plan we have on file. One of them broke free and is running towards your location. Zora's trying to cut them off. Ark inhaled and softly uttered a string of curses as he tried to steel himself. How long till you get down here? He asked at last. Shield was silent for a moment. 15 minutes for the tactical unit to arrive. Another 5 tops for them to breach one of the fire doors and make their entrance. 20 at the most. Try not to get killed before them, the Ark cop replied, knowing what Ark was thinking about doing. Ark nodded even though there was no one to see. 20 minutes. Okay then. See you in 20, he replied before ending the call. Thumbing the wireless remote in his toolkit again, he unlocked all the doors in the break room. The smart decision would have been to just sit there behind 3 locked doors and wait until help arrived. Unfortunately for him, 5 kids, 3 of them from Jylor, needed him to do the dumb thing. Unfortunately for Zora, true Jylorians always tried to look out for each other. The kitchen was deathly quiet as Ark slowly walked through with his gun raised and his ears open. Slowing his breath, he strained his ears to try and listen for a clue just what Zora was looking for. Stepping out of the sterile kitchen into the brightly colored foyer of the pizzeria, he soon picked up the familiar sound of Zora's voice. Freddy! Freddy! Come on, Frederico. The other children miss you, the costumed psycho called out from somewhere in the arcade area. Moving silently, Ark tried to remember who Zora was calling for. Frederico. That was the name of the kid in the file Shield sent him yesterday. Male, 12 years old, Jylorian. Parents were part of one of the desert-dwelling nomad clans that roved the sand-blasted badlands along the planet's equator and came up to Diff to work at one of the motorsports arenas about 3 blocks to the west of the pizzeria. Listening carefully, more to keep track of Zora than to find her quarry, he soon heard the sound of someone hyperventilating softly in the party hall. On the other side of the building from her, thank the benefactor, Ark thought to himself as he quietly slipped into the massive great hall. Automated housekeeping droids had already set the dining hall up for tomorrow's parties. Tables were set with placemats, paper plates, and festive tablecloths. Chairs were pushed in, and judging by the dim light of the powered-down holographic display in the corner, the birthday kids tomorrow were named Zian, Gertrude, and Blanket. The heavy breathing stopped the moment Ark stepped in. Wherever Fred was, he could clearly see that someone was nearby. Fred! Fred! Ark hissed. Come out, Fred. Your parents sent me. He whispered as loudly as he dared. If Frederico's parents were smart, they would have taught him to not fall for something like that. But it was the best Ark had to work with. And apparently it was enough. Fred quietly crawled out from under the table he was hiding and looked up at Ark hopefully. My parents sent you? He asked with a small smile. Technically the police did, but let's get you out of here, he replied and reached for the kid's hand. Frederico's smile broadened, then promptly disappeared as he looked at something directly behind Ark, his eyes filled with terror. Ark swore silently and immediately spun around with his weapon raised. Seeing the costumed Zora roughly 20 feet away, he pulled the trigger and fired an electromagnetically propelled metal slug at her. Still too slow, much too slow, the shot went wide and sent a metal chair flying from the impact as his opponent dodged, rolled, then jumped up and up before disappearing into the darkened rafters above the massive dining room. The bottom of Ark's stomach began to sink as he realized her costume wasn't just for show. She can jump and probably both climb and glide as well. Glide. Get going, Fred! Get going! Ark shouted as he grabbed his charge by the arm and started to run for the door. Behind them, a piercing shriek echoed from the darkness and Zora began her descent. Membrane wings fully extended and arms outstretched. Purple bolts of energy arced from her fingers and hit Ark squarely in the back. Zora pulled up and ascended again as she followed her quarry out the door and into the main foyer. Panicking, Fred ran into the band hall as fast as his feet would carry him, Zora swooping down and disappearing behind him. Ark grunted in pain as he lost track of both his charge and his opponent again. Seeing it over his shoulder, he could have sworn that her parlor trick was just some high-tech pyrotechnics, a deconstructed pocket laser or plasma torch tucked away in the suit's gloves. But he had gotten his fair share of plasma and laser burns in the salvage trade, and this was not either of those. Each of those purple bolts felt like someone whacked him with a piece of pipe. Hurt like a gyreling, but at least he could walk it off after a minute. The Gylorian techie uttered a string of unrepeatable profanity about Zora's social-economic status and reliance on technology as he slowly walked into the concert hall. The pain starting to fade. Already this was going to be one of those nights. The band hall was another open area that was creepy with the lights off and no one else around. The expansive dance floor was built to hold a crowd of easily 100 kids and their parents. Polished open floor that took up the majority of the room. Other than a small skybox and the rafters above his head, there wasn't anywhere for anyone to hide. Yet the room appeared to be empty. Just him and the droid band on the other side of the room, seemingly frozen in place. Just him and 4 droids that suddenly turned their heads to all look at him with the same unblinking stare that was becoming far too familiar tonight. Nope. Not tonight. He pulled out his universal remote and attempted to turn the 4 robots off remotely with his free hand. The wireless remote chirped angrily as it encountered the firewall software protecting the mechanical band from the exact sort of thing Ark was trying to do. Breaking through that would involve taking his eyes off the 4 of them or the still lurking Zora a lot longer than he could afford to. Damn it, looks like this should have been your gig, Nimic. Ark snarled and started to run for the exit. Even without looking over his shoulder, he knew they were right behind him. The dance floor was a polished synthetic stone, and the band was made entirely of metal. The heavy thuds of Sammy and 2 of her bandmates provided heavy percussion to the rapid beats of the arachnid drummer skittering along with them. No matter, he was almost at the door. Jumping and diving through the door, he quickly thumbed the wireless remote again and made the fire door to the concert hall slam shut behind him before he finished landing on the carpeted floor of the main foyer. Oh, thank the benefactor, the security on the doors is garbage. He exhaled as his 4 pursuers pounded on the metal door separating him from them. Yes, I will definitely have to upgrade my security next time. Not how I imagined you'd be earning your pay, but I'm not complaining. A familiar voice called from the other side of the room. Who's Nimic, though? Ark grumbled and quickly grabbed his hand cannon before rising to his feet. For whatever reason, Zora let him get up instead of kicking him while he was down. Something that definitely wouldn't have happened if the roles were reversed. She was toying with him. Why? Gun leveled at the costumed figure on the other end of the foyer, he considered his options. The whole tussle they just had couldn't have eaten more than 8 minutes of his 20 before help arrived. Zora just stared back at him from behind that unblinking mask of hers. She traded her machete for a long sword crackling with electrical energy and seemingly wrought out of sheet metal and copper wiring. The thing looked like a cheap costume prop, but Ark had worked around electricity long enough to know that those blue arcs running the length of the blade were not fake. A friend, bit of a computer wizard. He'd have so much fun taking your toys away from you than probably go and play a couple rounds in your arcade for a laugh, Ark replied, trying to keep from telling her any more than he already did. Less ways this freak knew how to hurt his friends, the better. Now you answer one of my questions. What is this all about? He asked challengingly. You really think I would make it easy by acting like a villain in some Vori serial? You're going to have to work harder than that if you want to understand my mistress's plan, she laughed, wagging her index finger at him. So there is someone else above you, and it's a woman, he replied with a smile as Zora tightened her grip on her weapon. What? Did you really think I was just some dumb junkyard scrapper looking for a wage slave job? You Fazorians are always full of yourselves. True to form, Zora responded to that remark by lunging forward, her sword lifted up as she's ready to swing. Ark replied by firing a shot and quickly taking a step to the side. The round found its mark, if only barely, and drew a splash of blood that splattered against the plastic walls of the foyer. The blade whistled as it sliced through the air where he once stood, cutting with a sharpness he did not expect from something that looked like a toy. She turned to attack again, but Ark was already gone, returning to the kitchen to try and stall her for a little while longer. The longer he kept her running around and playing this game, the less time she had to finish whatever she was trying to do. Back in the kitchen, the undercover mechanic ducked behind a freestanding island and nearly jumped when he came face to face with Frederico, who had been cowering behind the same kitchen fixture. "Fred!" Ark hissed as quietly as he could manage. "You nearly gave me a heart attack," he chastised while keeping an ear open for Zora. "But that lady wants to sacrifice us," Frederico replied in lieu of an apology. Ark quickly peered over the kitchen island to see that the two of them were still currently alone before turning back to his charge. "Say what?" "That Zora lady says she needs blood and fear to make her boss happy. Said the boss would give her more magical powers if she gave us a good scare and spilled our blood all at once," Ark's young charge replied, giving him the most exposition he heard all night. "Trapped in a pizza joint with a serial killer that believes in blood rituals," Ark thought briefly before Zora's bizarre sword cut through the kitchen cabinet between him and Frederico. In a flash, both Gylorians were up and running towards the back of the kitchen, towards a door that Ark realized wasn't supposed to be there. With their captor hot on their heels, Ark and Frederico ran into a large room that was completely empty except for 5 livestock containers on the far end and a bizarre green pentagram on the floor. Adrenaline pumping through his veins and Zora right behind him, it took Ark a moment to realize the pentagram was glowing with enough light to fill the room. Standing in the center of the pentagram with Frederico beside him, he turned and faced Zora as she stood at the effigy's edge. "So, you actually believe this mysticism nonsense?" he asked, hoping she lost track of time and forgot the clock was still counting down. "Not very vulgar in front of children, are you? I would have expected a Gylorian to be more profane upon seeing something like this," Zora replied, her tone dripping with smugness. "What, this?" Ark began, gesturing to the arcane symbol beneath his feet. "Glowing paint. And that was a nice trick back in the dining hall with the magic missiles. What gun did you use and how did you miniaturize it so it fit in your gloves? Likewise, how did you make that cosplay prop function like a real sword, especially one sharp enough to cut through a 1/4 inch of commercial-grade polymer?" "My patron gives me magical powers over technology and matter in exchange for my devotion," Zora replied cryptically. "You really think you're some kind of space wizard?" "Yeah, sure, and I'm a level 15 elf paladin," Ark replied, wiggling his calloused fingers mockingly at Zora. Ark could just picture Zora blinking behind her mask, her train of thought momentarily derailed. "What's an elf?" "No idea. Some game Nimic plays when he's not doing computer work," he replied, realizing he just blew his chance to stall Zora by babbling about nothing. Zora apparently also realized he was trying to distract her in order to give Lieutenant Shield and his team time to break in, responding by gesturing towards a pile of discarded junk to her side with her free hand. The pile of junk glowed with the same light as the pentagram, and a small robot formed and began to hover in a tight orbit around Zora. Ark blinked as he watched the display. He could easily explain away most of her tricks, but that one was a bit harder. "Well, some new robot tech from Fazora?" If it was, his opponent was not inclined to enlighten him. Zora charged again, and this time did not miss. Her sword cut through the armored fabric of his coveralls and pulled away with a splash of crimson as electricity briefly arced over his body. Federico ran away from the mad magician as fast as his short legs could carry him, and in a moment of inspired thinking, hit the releases on the other 4 thunk cages. Seeing their opportunity, the 5 children ran out of the ritual chamber. Zora hesitated, splitting her attention between Ark and the children, trying to catch at least one of them before they all escaped. Unfortunately for her, her opponent was not easily distracted. With a concentration that had been honed by years of pain and hardship on Jylor, Ark ignored the fleeing children and aimed his gun at Zora and her pet robot. Pulling the trigger, he fired. And again. And again. And again. As the 4th round found its mark, Ark screamed unintelligibly as his mind was consumed by a seething rage that had been bubbling inside him for years. There always was someone that thought they could take what belonged to him. That was going to end right here and right now. The first 2 rounds hit her hovering protector drone, shredding it in a shower of scrap metal. The second 2 tore into her left shoulder and right side, drawing blood and staggering her from the impact of his shots. As he tried to fire off a shot at her head, she raised her good arm and uttered her single word in a language he did not recognize. The pentagram glowed with a blinding light. Ark raised his hand to shield his eyes, and when the light faded, Zora had disappeared. Before he could even wonder where she had gotten to, a distant explosion echoed from the employee entrance. Soon Ark was greeted by the familiar sight of Lieutenant Shield as the Ark Cop walked into the ritual chamber. The Intercrux Ark Cop was accompanied by a squad of Vody Marines, their iconic shoulder-mounted cannons scanning the room for threats like a team of angry serpents. The investigation and resulting raid was a success. So why did Ark feel like they were left with more questions than answers? The end? Question mark.